Amen.
Awesome.
Thank you guys so much. Well, it is exciting to be here. NETC 2020.
Woo!
Thank you to the Campbells. My name is Pat. This is my awesome wife, Micia, with her fire shirt. I know some of
Stop.
the
The
teens
teens
in
put me
SoCon
on.
put her onto that. So shout out to Southern Connecticut teens as well. And really excited to be here with you guys and to be able to speak on a topic that we're passionate about, something we love. And I love just the theme of heroes, right, that we get to talk about. So today we're going to talk about heroic courage. Heroic courage. You know, I don't know about you, but I love those movies like The Gladiator, The Braveheart, The Interstellar, just all of these movies where you see like these moments, these heroic moments, and people have to, have courage to overcome and to make it through. And so, and right now in life, right, we need a lot of courage, right? As we talk about discipleship, as we talk about spirituality, I mean, courage is just such a huge part of this. And and courage obviously involves fear. Like we're going to be scared. That's why courage exists. And so courage is being able to overcome a lot of fears and being able to deal with life in a courageous way. So today we're going to talk about heroic courage. And I wanted to read something to you guys really quick here. It's from a book that I love called Waking the Dead. But listen to this with me. You are not what you think you are. There is a glory to your life that your enemy fears, and he is hell bent on destroying the glory before you act on it. This part of the answer will sound unbelievable at first. Perhaps it will sound too good to be true. Certainly, you will wonder if it is true for you. But once you begin to see with those eyes, once you have begun to know it is true from the bottom of your heart, it will change everything. The story of your life is the story of a long and brutal assault on your heart by the one who knows what you could be and fears it. God has a purpose and a plan for all of our lives. And Satan, the enemy, he fears the people that we can become, fears the person that you could become if you would have the heroic courage to answer that call of whoever God is calling you to be. God has an incredible purpose for your life. And it's not to live the mundane and the daily life and the grind. It's to do something with your life. It's to reach for that glory that exists. And sometimes we need that because we can be under a spell in this world, so to speak, where we're just so like anesthetized and we don't understand that we're meant for so much more. And the world can cast a spell, but Jesus has the solution. Jesus has the answer to breaking us free from this spell and to live the lives that we were always meant to live. And to do that, we have to have heroic courage. And our first point today is we got to have the courage to answer the call. Courage to answer the call. So I'm going to share with you this scripture in Acts chapter 9, verse 15 and 16. And this is a part of Paul's conversion. And so in Acts 9, 15 through 16, it says, "But the Lord said to Ananias, 'Go, this man is my chosen instrument to proclaim my name to the Gentiles and their kings and to the people of Israel. I will show him how much he must suffer for my name.'" Paul had a calling. His calling was to be a light to the Gentiles. And it talks about how he's going to proclaim the name of God to the Gentiles and their kings. And by the end of Paul's life, he's there. He's preaching to King Agrippa. He's literally preaching to a king, right? And so he lived out his calling. He understood his calling. He was an ambassador of Christ. And he appealed to the Gentiles throughout his entire life, even though it seemed like he would be an unlikely candidate to do so. I mean, he grew up a Hebrew of Hebrews. So the idea of him reaching out to the Gentiles, like, that doesn't even make sense. But God knew his purpose. And Paul, he labored, he fought, right, to fulfill his purpose. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 10, we're going to read that. And this is Paul's attitude, right? And for those of you that understand how to work hard, how to grind, you understand this. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 10, it says, "But by the grace of God, I am what I am. And this grace to me was not without effect. No, I worked harder than all of them, yet not I, but the grace of God that was with me." You know, Paul did not want to receive God's grace in vain. He was like, I'm going to work hard. I know my mission. I know my purpose. I know what I'm here for. And I'm going to go for it with everything that I got. Yeah. I'm not going to waste time doing this or that. I'm going to go for it, whatever God is calling me to do. Paul was clear on his mission in life. He was clear on his life's work. Are we? What is your mission? What is your calling? You know, for so many of us, and I'm hearing so many of these stories, right? Like, how'd you get to teen camp? And I wasn't going to go, but then my parents talked to me, and or I wasn't going to go, and this or that happened. And then you end up here, right, at teen camp. That's not by coincidence. You might think it is, but it's not. You're here for a reason, and God is calling you to his purpose. The question is will you answer the call? So many people in the Bible were called at just different times in their lives. I mean, we have Ezekiel. They say he was around 28. We don't really know. They say Samuel was around 11. Timothy was around 16. Paul was between 28 and 31. And so these calls in our lives, they come at any time. And if you're here at teen camp today, this call is coming. When Jesus died on the cross, the call went out to the entire world. That anybody can hear that message. They can respond to it. You can respond to it. If you're capable of hearing the message of, man, Jesus died for you and for me, then we can respond to that message. Before Micia shares, I want to share this quick story about Stan Lee. Many of you guys know the late Stan Lee, and we're not going to talk about the heroes that he made, but I want to talk about Stan Lee himself and his heroic courage. So Stan Lee was, I don't know if you guys know this, but he was about to give up on his comic book career by the end of the 1950s. And he was 34, 35 years old at that time. And his wife spoke to him. And his wife was like, before you give up, why not just try to create the type of characters that you would want to read about? And for Stan Lee, this was like the call came in. Like that's it. I mean, he was at his wit's end. His wife has this conversation with him. And he's like, yeah, I want to be authentic. I want to read the stories that I want to write the stories that I would want to read. And so his real work began. And it took a while. There were some twists and some turns, but he did hear the call. This led to the Marvel Revolution, right? Fantastic Four, Hulk, Thor, Iron Man, X-Men. And I love this quote from Stan Lee. He says, a story without a message is like a man without a soul. Wow. You know, what is the message that your story is carrying? What is the message that your soul has? We all got to have that message that we're bringing to the world within us. That's part of finding our calling. I want to share one more thing about his heroic courage. And you can tell he had that courage because the movie or the character Black Panther, right? And a lot of us saw the movie. That character, do you know what year that character was created by Stan Lee? That character was created in 1966 at the height of the civil rights movement. So think about that. An African hero at the height of the civil rights movement in the United States. An African hero who was smarter, wealthier, and more technologically advanced than any other. During the golden age of comic books, Stan Lee took that courageous risk. I would say for sure Stan Lee found his calling. He was finally living it out by telling the stories he wanted to read. And he took the risk to tell the stories and to live out his calling. Micia is going to share a little bit on this as well.
Yeah, so I just want to talk about, okay, now we've been called, right? And we've been reconciled. Say you've become a disciple, you answered the call, and it's kind of like, now what? Like, I know I felt that, you know, I answered the call and it's like, okay, God, what else do you have planned for me? And so, but God showed me that I had to have the courage to answer God's call to use my weaknesses for him. And that was hard. Like, that took courage, because for me, it was like I wanted to hide those things. I wanted to portray an image that I'm perfect, that I don't struggle. It's all good. So I was ashamed of my weaknesses and I hid for a long time. But God showed me, even throughout the Bible, you know, he uses people with weaknesses to reach other people who may be hurting, are suffering from the same weakness you have, but doesn't have hope, you know, doesn't know what direction their life is going to go in. And it's the same for you, you know, and never in a million years did I think that God would call me to use my weakness, which is depression and ADHD, for his glory, because I was so ashamed of it and I hid it and I denied it for so long. And so I felt like, look, if I told people my weaknesses, like they would just label me, look down on me, feel like they would just think I couldn't do anything and I wasn't good for anything, and but it became the complete opposite. I've been able to bond with teens and adults on deeper levels because I know because I can say that I relate. I know exactly what you're going through and I can help you through it. So, and I had the opportunity to show people that God is there for them in their darkest moments. And it has been such a blessing. What a blessing it is to use my weaknesses for God. But really, it became my strength. Like it became like my superpower, like my special power for God. And I want to ask you, like, what special power do you have? Don't hide it. Really think about it. Use it. It is a gift. And maybe it's mental illness, maybe it's a disability. I think about Connor McCormick, man, and how he is a superstar in my eyes. Like he tells his story, like he told his story at camp, and there's not a heart in the room that isn't moved. That is a hero, but first teens, who haven't answered the call to become a disciple yet, be courageous to answer that call because God will use you in ways you never would have even imagined.
Amen. She is amazing. So thank you for sharing. And the heroes in our lives, right? We know them. They're all around us. People that are willing to have this heroic courage. Yeah. And I just want to share really quick about, Phil and Chris Arsenal. I mean, to me, they are some heroes.
Yep.
Like they know their purpose. I mean, Phil and Chris Arsenal, they could take a job leading any church, any place that they wanted to, but they stay and they serve in the youth and family ministry because that is where God has them. That is their calling. They love you guys. They love the teens. They want to be here. That's why they've spent decades in the youth and family ministry. And there's so much power to knowing what your calling is. There's so much. You can hear the fire, the fuego when Phil talks. You can see the love with Chris because of how much they love the teen ministry. And that's the power of finding your purpose and living out your calling. And my question for you guys is, what are you fighting for? What are your goals? What are you called to? Are you living it? Are you living out God's calling for your life? God is calling each and every one of us to something. If you're not sure what that is, I'm going to read a passage for you guys in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 20. It says, "We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. We implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. As God's co-workers, we urge you not to receive God's grace in vain. For he says, in the time of my favor, I heard you. And in the day of salvation, I helped you. I tell you, now is the time of God's favor. Now is the day of salvation." Today is the day. Yeah. We're begging you guys. That's why we do this. This is why we do what we do to help others be reconciled to God. And we're begging you, be reconciled to God. Don't let the distractions of life, don't let the fear, don't let anything keep you from being reconciled today. Today is the day of God's favor. Today is the day where you can receive salvation, as Phil mentioned in one of his lessons earlier. Paul was imploring people to be reconciled, and we want to do the same too. When you're reconciled to God, your sin is taken away and you become the righteousness of God. You don't have to earn that. It's credited to you from Jesus. To be a Christian, you do not need to be perfect. And I know you hear this all the time and you can repeat it back to me, but you hear it, but why don't you believe it? Why don't you believe that you don't need to be perfect to be a Christian? And when will you finally believe that you don't need to be perfect to be a Christian? You don't need to be perfect. You just have to be willing to answer the call. Have you answered the call yet? Have you been reconciled to God? Why not? What are you scared of? How many times, right, do we need to be convicted? I just want to share, honestly, I know it's almost cliche, right? Like, ask somebody to study the Bible and we hear that message and we've heard it and how many times are we going to, how many times are you going to hear a message before you're willing to actually do it and ask somebody? Hey, can you study the Bible with me? I want to learn more. That doesn't, you saying I want to study the Bible doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're saying I want to be perfect. That's saying I want to get baptized. No, I want to learn more. But I worry that we can hear these messages and we can be challenged and we can feel it and we can want to even do it, but we don't do it. And as that's happening, we're turning that blind eye to that question. We're tuning it out. And in the process, we can even tune out God's voice and his calling.
Yeah.
Don't tune out God's voice. Don't harden your hearts. You won't regret it. You will not regret it.
Yeah.
You know, a second thing I want to share with you guys and talk a little bit about today is having courage in discomfort. Courage in discomfort. So we've been having a lot of discomfort lately, right?
Yep.
I mean, teen camp, I know you guys are like, oh, it's going to be virtual and I don't know how this is going to work. And mom, dad, I don't want to go. And, you know, all these different things. And we've been dealing with this pandemic.
Yep.
Even within pandemic, it's been so challenging. There's been all these crises throughout the world, the racial injustice. There's been a lot of discomfort lately. Even leaning into some of those conversations for the first time, if it is the first time, can be very uncomfortable. All these things, having to put the mask on. You know, I had teens, I'm not going to put them on blast right now. I was this close to putting you guys on blast, and you know who you are. All right. But we had teens like, yo, Pat, man, I don't want to wear a mask. You know, like masks are uncomfortable. It's a lot of discomfort, you know, and I get it. Life has been uncomfortable lately, but we got to have courage in the discomfort. You know, I've been fighting myself to live out this calling. I've been uncomfortable lately, having to do all these different things. I'm like, I make all these flyers for church all the time. I spend hours on like an iPad trying to figure this stuff out. I'm trying to do a million different things, right? And wear all these different hats, as many of us are. And it's uncomfortable, but I still want to fight to have that courage in discomfort, to be an ambassador, as the scripture mentioned earlier, for Christ, to live out being a disciple. And even in normal terms, being a disciple can sometimes have some discomfort, right? Jesus talks about that. Foxes have holes, birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. You know, sharing our faith can be uncomfortable. Being different than your friend group can be uncomfortable. Not doing what everybody else is doing, being willing to go where God calls you. I mean, think about Jonah. He was asked to go to Nineveh. He was like, no, that's way too uncomfortable for me. I'm going to run away. And then he ends up getting swallowed by a whale, right? So, you know, how we embrace discomfort, you know, how do you embrace it, and how we deal with it really matters. But if we're willing to embrace the discomfort as God would have it, and in our pursuit of him, that's where we're going to find freedom. We can be comfortable. Like, it's possible for you to be comfortable, like by the world's standards, but still in a jail cell. I mean, think about the Israelites. They left, they were in the desert, and they're talking about, oh, I wish we were back in Egypt where we had all this food. But they were in slavery, but they were comfortable in their slavery. Don't be comfortable in jail. You know, Paul faced discomfort as well. We all will face it. In 2 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 5, for when we came to Macedonia, we had no rest, but we were harassed at every turn. Conflicts on the outside, fears within.
Wow.
Love this passage because it's talking about what's going on the outside, which we read a lot about in the Bible, but I also appreciate Paul's vulnerability here. He's like, man, I had fears within. Wow. There was conflicts on the outside, yes, but I had a lot of fears within. He had that inner turmoil, that suffering that he was going through. You know, my struggles are nothing like Paul's. However, I can relate, and I think a lot of us can relate to having fears within. You know, I've battled with depression and anxiety throughout the majority of my adult life. And so I know a thing or two about dealing with fear and anguish and all this inner turmoil. And I understand what that's like, having fears within. And I don't, and I want to have that mindset of I'm not going to give in to my fear. I know God, I know who he is. I'm going to have the courage as I face this internal discomfort.
Yeah.
Because if we don't find a way to go to God with that, to go to God with that emotional discomfort, then we're going to have some really unhealthy ways of dealing with things and coping with things, right? And this is typically where some really disgusting sin can present itself. And I want to talk about something taboo for a second. I want to talk about pornography. You know, it's unhealthy and it's sinful. Actually, all sin is unhealthy, right? And honestly, it's a way we can go to that as a way of dealing with emotional discomfort. It's a coping mechanism in so many ways. And more research has indicated that the sin of watching pornography is more a way of coping with uncomfortable emotions than it is just pure pleasure seeking. So what does that mean? This means that when you feel uncomfortable, you turn to sin, like watching pornography or sexual sin. And it's dehumanizing to do that. It's telling God that you are not enough for me. I need to go to something else to deal with my internal discomfort. I need to go to something else other than you, God, because God, you are not enough for me. You've created this whole world. You've put me where I am. You've blessed my whole life. And you know what? That is not enough. Jesus died for me. That is not enough for me. I need to turn. I need to go to my room and hide out and watch pornography. And that's how I'm going to cope with my internal discomfort. And we cannot let that be the case. And this is true of many sins that they come because we're dealing with internal discomfort. And so our way of coping is I'm going to sin. For me in my life, I smoked. I was addicted to marijuana for probably 2 years, and I partied and I drank. And that's how I dealt with my depression. That's how I dealt with my anxiety. That's how I dealt with stress. That's how I learned to cope, is using those sins. And that's the easy way of dealing with things. However, I want to encourage you that Jesus offers you an alternative way to deal with whatever is going on in your life. And in John chapter 4, verse 13 through 14, this is the conversation with Jesus and the woman at the well. She had 5 husbands. A lot of you guys know about that conversation. In John 4, 13 through 14, Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." Jesus is saying, if you go to anything else, you're going to keep needing it. If you go to any sin, you're going to keep needing it. Go to Jesus when you feel discomfort. This woman went to her romantic relationships. Jesus is saying, I am greater than the ways you have been filling yourself up. Whatever ways you're filling yourself up, you'll need to keep coming back to it. So think about it. If you watch, pornography to cope, what you're actually saying there is God is not enough. That water, you're trading in eternal water for this water that's just going to leave you thirsty again. Why would we do that? I want to lift up my wife because to me, she's an incredible example of somebody who knows how to cope with pain in a spiritual way. And when we went to Spain, I actually spoke Spanish. We went on the mission field to Spain. She didn't speak any Spanish at all. And we went to Spain with that. So I'll let her share now.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, what do you do when you feel uncomfortable? And what's the first thing you turn to? How do you process all of those things and your feelings? And, here's what I did as a teenager, guys. I had deep conversations with God, also known as prayer, right? And every time I felt discomfort, I still practice this. I would just always go to God. And this pattern has just followed throughout my life. These deep conversations with God will help you through discomfort. Like Pat said, we lived in Spain for 2.5 years on the mission field. And boy, it was exciting. We sold all our stuff. We quit our jobs. We moved. It was like a dream. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. We're going to live in Europe. But I took for granted how hard it was going to be to make an impact over there if I didn't speak the language. So the first year I could barely express myself. Can you imagine not being able to speak or having any really deep, significant conversations with anyone besides, for me, it was besides my husband or a few campus students for a whole year. I felt mute. I cry. I even cried during a singles meeting that we had. Everyone's talking around me, and Patrick's fluent, like you said, so he's chatting around, and I'm just sitting there nodding, like I understand what they're saying, but I do not, And that was so uncomfortable that it made me cry, publicly. And there were more times that I felt why, God, did you even bring me here if I can't make an impact? Then why am I even here? And I had to fall on my knees so many times, just weeping in conversation with God. So when everyone fell asleep, I locked the door, I'd go in the living room, I'd turn off all the lights, we had this really cool big window, And I just look at the stars and just cry out to God and pray like, God, help me find my purpose here, and use me even though I was just so uncomfortable. And after every prayer, I would find courage. Every time I step away from that window, every time I got up, I no longer felt defeated every single time, but I felt strong. I got my comfort from God. Okay, I'm getting a little emotional. Um, he gave me this comfort, even though the circumstances had never changed. The circumstances didn't change at all. I didn't magically speak Spanish all of a sudden, but within myself, like I became more secure that God did have a plan for me. We ended up baptizing a girl that ended up being my best friend. She ended up staying in Spain a few years after we even came back and helped out the campus ministry in the church. We helped two couples date and get married. Patrick officiated one of the weddings, and we made lifelong friendships. And there were even more things that happened. And that experience of that long-term discomfort made me feel like superwoman when we moved back to the States and we got a job here. I felt like there is nothing that I couldn't handle or get through. I had like super strength, and what people said was like hard here was like light work to me. I was like, oh, that's nothing compared to what I went through. But little did I know that God was molding me and shaping me through the discomfort, guys. But I had to have courage to endure and not give up.
Amen. Wow. You're awesome. So, like Lamisha asked, how do you respond when you're uncomfortable? What sin do you turn to when you're uncomfortable? Do you call, text guys or girls so that you can build up your ego, your self-esteem? Do you turn to anger? You push people away rather than dealing with whatever's really going on? Do you isolate yourself? Where do you go to fill yourself up?
Yeah.
And in that discomfort, remember, God is trying to mold you.
Yep.
Let him finish his work. Keep going to him. Don't take the shortcuts. And as you process through your discomfort, how do you process all the things you're feeling? Honestly, I don't think enough teens, and I don't think enough people in general, honestly, go to God to process emotions or understand how to go to God to process emotions. And I want to encourage you to learn how to process emotions with God. Learn how to process emotions in general. Find out what is bothering you, what's going on. A lot of times you say, I'm angry or I'm sad, but there's something else that's going on. I'm scared. Why? Ask yourself those questions. Why? Get to the root of it so that Jesus can meet you there. If it stays on the surface, then you're not going to get the answers that you're looking for. Find out how to do that. I mean, I love journaling. I love typing out my prayers. I love going on prayer walks. I love those good conversations with incredible people that can just ask me questions, that can draw out my heart when sometimes I don't even know what's going on. But find ways of dealing with your emotions in a healthy way. And the Bible's given us so much. The fellowship, prayer, time with God. I mean, these are awesome ways to really deal with this internal discomfort that we can feel. Jesus knew how to cope with things spiritually. He knew how to cope with his emotions. And you can tell that he did that work. You can tell he put the work in to putting and laying out his emotions before God, because when he was most uncomfortable in the moments leading to his death, right before his death and up until his death, the most discomfort that any human being could ever experience, you can see the way he courageously faced his discomfort. And what did he do in that discomfort? He washed people's feet. He called Judas his enemy, someone who betrayed him, a friend. So he took away enemy. Judas, even in the book, is not an enemy of Jesus. He's a friend of Jesus. He healed the guard who came to arrest him, whose ear was cut off. He healed somebody that came to arrest him. He begged God to forgive his murderers. And he was able to do that because he took everything that was going on with him and he was able to bring it before God so that he can love people, he can treat people, so that he can live out his mission, his calling. Yes, sharing your faith or studying the Bible, it can be uncomfortable. All right. It can be. It is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to talk about these things. Why are you asking me those questions? I don't know if I trust you. Who are you? You don't know me. Why do you think you know me? all that stuff comes up because we're uncomfortable. Satan feeds us a lie. We believe the lie. Like, you can't trust that team leader. You can't trust that person. You can't trust that team. They're only calling you because they want you to stay, like, oh, they got an agenda, right? This comes because it's uncomfortable. We don't want to. So what do? We push it away rather than engage in real deep discussion, even though we claim we want deep discussion. But as soon as the deep discussion comes around, it's like, nah. You have an agenda. Something then comes up.
Yeah.
There's fear present. That comes because of fears that you have. But do you want to be the type of person that lets fear dictate the rest of your life? Because it starts now, whether or not you're going to let fear dictate the rest of your life. I want to share a quote with you from Eleanor Roosevelt. You gain strength, courage, and confidence by every experience in which you really stop to look fear in the face. You are able to say to yourself, I have lived through this horror. I can take the next thing that comes along. You must do the thing you think you cannot do. Guys, we got to do the things we think we can't do. And watch how God helps you in that process. And that's going to build your faith. That's going to build your courage. And that's going to build your confidence.
Wow.
If you want to build confidence, you have to face your fears. We all have to face our fears. Quick story. I boxed for a long time. A lot of you guys know that. I tell my teens this too. Like, I was scared before every fight, but I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna let fear. When that bell sounds, I got to go out there. Okay. I'm not going to stool when the bell sounds because I'm scared. Right. And because of that, it built confidence. I was able to overcome it. I was like, okay. And I've seen God work in my life in incredible ways. And now I can look back at those moments and say, okay, this is going to be no different. God is still going to help me in this moment. And as we're striving for this heroic courage and wrapping this up, guys, we can never forget why. Like, why are we doing this? Why do I need to have this heroic courage? Why study the Bible? Why reach out to people? Why live out my life's purpose? Why live out this calling that God has for me? We can never forget why. That is where we're going to draw our strength from. If you lose track of the why and it just becomes, my team leader told me to, my parents told me to, my friends this or that, then you're gonna lose your motivation to keep going. You're gonna lose your motivation to overcome fear. And as soon as you're faced with fear, you're done because you forgot why you're doing it. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 14 through 15, we have our why. And I want to encourage all of you to hold on to this reason. Hold on to this why. This is the why. This is why you're going to ask somebody to study the Bible. This is why you're going to reach out to your friend. This is why you're going to try to follow God's purpose for your life. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, 14 and 15. For Christ's love compels us, because we are convinced that one died for all, and therefore all died. And he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again. The why is the love of Christ, who came and died for you, for me, for every single one of us. And it is an undeniable fact that this man 2,000 years ago loved you so much that he would die for you. That's why we're doing this. That's why we want to know more about God in the Bible.
Yeah.
Whatever your sin, whatever you have done, God can forgive it all. Whatever your pain, God can heal it all. You know, I think about Paul and I think about, shouldn't his mistakes have made him feel insecure about going to God? Shouldn't it have made him feel ineffective as a Christian? Oh, I've done all these bad things in my life, or I'm not a good person. No, he drew strength from the fact that he was forgiven, and he made sure that that grace was not without effect in his life. Grace, love, Jesus, these are the reasons why. God's love for you is greater than any obstacle in your way. Amen. Stay confident through it all. Have that heroic courage. Set out this week and the rest of your life to have heroic courage. And if you ever feel like you're lacking in courage, as we all can feel that sometimes, go back, spend time with Jesus. He can give it to you. Thank you guys so much for letting us share. We love you so much. We really appreciate it.